When I first saw Gopher Prairie from the train window, I thought it looked like a toy town someone had left in the middle of a huge field. The streets were straight and empty. The houses stood far apart, with small trees trying to grow beside them. It was early autumn, and the wind carried a smell of dry grass and smoke. I told myself that it only looked small because I was new. I wanted to believe that soon I would find beauty in it. My name is Carol. I was 24 when I married Dr. Will Kennicott. He was a kind man, simple and proud of his town. He said Gopher Prairie was the best place in the world to live and raise a family. I wanted to believe him. I had dreams of building something new, something that mattered. I wanted to make life more beautiful. I wanted to bring art, color, and music to people who did not have time to dream. The train stopped, and Will smiled at me as he helped me down. The wind was cold, and I saw a few men near the station wearing heavy coats and hats. They looked at me quietly, as if trying to guess who I was. Will laughed and said they were all good people, only shy at first. I smiled too, but I felt small and lost. I looked at the town again and felt something deep in my chest. I did not know if it was excitement or fear. Our new house was big for a small town. It had a white fence and a large front porch. I told myself it would be home. Inside, I found heavy furniture, dark walls, and thick curtains. Everything looked clean but lifeless. I tried to see it as something I could change. I imagined soft colors, new fabrics, and sunlight filling the rooms. Will said I could do anything I wanted, but I noticed that he liked everything just as it was. In the first week, many women came to visit me. They brought cakes and pies, smiled politely, and asked about my life in the city. They were kind, but their kindness felt thin, like a glass wall between us. When I spoke about books or music, they smiled again but did not answer. They talked about church, recipes, and the weather. I tried to listen, but my mind kept running away from the room. I began to walk through the town every morning. The streets were wide and covered with dust. There were no trees tall enough to give shade. The same dogs barked at the same corners, and the same people greeted me in the same way every day. The post office, the grocery store, and the bank looked almost the same. Everything seemed stuck in time. Before we continue, I would love to know, where are you listening from? Which city, which country? Share it in the comments. And if you are enjoying this story, please subscribe to hear more every week. Sometimes I went to the school to watch the children play. I wanted to speak with the teachers and share my ideas about better lessons and art projects. They smiled and said they were too busy. I understood, but I felt like the whole town had agreed to stay the same forever. When I told Will about it, he said I should relax and not worry. He said small towns worked slowly, and people did not like quick changes. I said nothing more, but inside I felt disappointed. In the evenings, Will liked to sit by the fire and read the newspaper. I sat beside him, pretending to read too, but my mind was full of plans. I wanted to start a women's club where we could talk about books and new ideas. I wanted to plant flowers on the main street and paint the gray walls with colors. I wanted to make the people see that beauty was as important as work. When I told Will about the club, he laughed kindly and said I could try, but he warned me that people might not join. He was right. I went to every house and invited the women. Most of them said they were busy with their children or husbands. A few said yes, but when the day came, only 3 women arrived. They were quiet and shy. I tried to start a discussion about a book, but one of them said she had not read it. Another said she only came because she thought we were going to bake. After that day, I felt tired. I stopped making plans for a while. I helped Will with his patients when he needed me, and I spent time cleaning the house and sewing curtains. The days began to look the same. Morning, afternoon, evening, always in the same order, with nothing new to expect. The people around me seemed happy with that, but I was not. I wanted to breathe in a world that was alive, not frozen in its habits. One afternoon, I sat on the porch and watched the sky turn pink above the flat land. I thought about my life before marriage, the dreams I had when I studied in the city, the energy I once felt. Now everything felt smaller. I told myself I was still young, and perhaps I would find a way to change things later. But when I looked at the street, I saw the same slow movement of people, the same silence of houses, the same stillness in the air. That night, I looked at Will sleeping beside me. He was peaceful, satisfied with life. I envied his calm. I loved him, but I felt that love could not fill the space between what I wanted and what I had. The town had begun to shape me, to press against me, like hands slowly closing around something delicate. I did not know it then, but that was how my dreams began to break. Before I continue with the story, please like, subscribe, share and tell me in the comments where you are listening from. Your support means a lot. Now let's continue. I woke up one morning and decided that I could not keep living like that. The house was too quiet, the streets too slow, and my thoughts too full of silence. I needed to do something. I needed to prove to myself that change was possible. I told Will that I wanted to help the town look more beautiful. He smiled but did not understand what I meant. He said the town looked fine already. He said, people here liked things simple and practical. I said nothing, but I knew that simple was only another word for empty. I started with small things. I bought paint and flowers for the front yard. I placed bright curtains in the windows and put new pictures on the walls. The neighbors came to see the house, and most of them said it looked nice. But I could see from their faces that they thought it was strange. They said it was too modern or too bright. They liked the old way better. I thanked them and smiled, but inside I felt sad. It was not about paint or curtains. It was about the idea that life could be better. They did not want that idea. They wanted everything to stay the same. I went to the town council meeting one evening. I wanted to suggest that we build a park in the center of town. I had drawn a small plan with trees, benches, and a playground for children. When I spoke, everyone looked at me politely, but said nothing. After I finished, the mayor said that the town did not have money for unnecessary things. One man even said that parks were for big cities, not for simple people like us. I felt my face turn red, but I kept smiling. I left the meeting early, and as I walked home through the cold wind, I wanted to cry. The next morning, I looked at the town again. The streets were brown with dust. The shop windows were covered with old paper signs. The women wore the same heavy coats. Even the air seemed tired. I asked myself if it was my fault for wanting more than what was here. Maybe I was the strange one, not them. But then I thought about the children who would grow up seeing only this. I thought about their small dreams, already closed before they began. That was when I decided I could not give up. I started a reading club for young women. I printed small posters and left them in the library and grocery store. At first, no one came. Then, 2 girls joined. They were both teachers at the local school. They were kind and curious. We met once a week to talk about books and ideas. It was not much, but it was something alive in a place that felt dead. We read poems and short stories and shared our thoughts. For a few hours each week, I felt like myself again. But even that small thing began to cause trouble. People in town started to talk about me. They said I thought I was better than everyone else. They said I wanted to turn their daughters into dreamers who forgot their homes. Some women stopped visiting me. Others crossed the street when they saw me walking. Will told me not to listen. He said gossip was part of small-town life. But I could feel the wall growing between me and everyone else. When winter came, the snow made the streets even quieter. Will was busy with his patients, and I spent long hours alone in the house. The walls seemed to move closer every day. I tried to write letters to my friends from college, but their lives were full and far away. They wrote about plays, concerts, and books. I wrote back and said everything was fine, even though it was not. Sometimes I went to the river outside town. I liked to watch the frozen water and imagine it moving under the ice, still alive, still waiting for spring. I thought that maybe I was like that river, trapped for a time but not gone. But the longer I stayed in Gopher Prairie, the harder it became to believe that in the spring, the snow melted, and I decided to try again. I began to plan a small festival for the town. I wanted music, art, and games for the children. I asked the mayor for permission to use the schoolyard. He said yes, but only if I could find money for it myself. I went to every shop and asked for help. Some gave small things, others refused. I worked for weeks, making decorations and planning everything. On the day of the festival, the sky was bright and the air was warm. I wore a simple white dress and walked through the schoolyard early in the morning. I watched people arrive, families with children, old men and women, everyone smiling and talking. For the first time, I felt hopeful. Maybe this was the beginning of something new. But by the afternoon, the smiles began to fade. The music stopped when one of the instruments broke. The food ran out faster than we expected. Some people complained that it was too noisy. Others said it was too modern. When a young woman sang a song from the city, an old man shouted that it was not proper. By evening, most people had gone home. I sat on a bench, surrounded by empty cups and paper ribbons, and felt tired in my bones. Will found me there and said that I had worked hard and should not feel bad. He said the town was proud of me, but I could see in his eyes that he did not believe it. I thanked him and walked home beside him in silence. After that day, something inside me began to change. I stopped trying to fix everything. I still smiled at people, but it was an empty smile. I still walked to the market, but the streets no longer made me curious. I stopped going to the reading club because the 2 girls moved away to other towns. I told myself I should be happy with what I had, but I was not. Sometimes, in the middle of the night, I woke up and felt a strange mix of sadness and anger. I wanted to run away, but I did not know where to go. I looked at Will sleeping beside me, calm and peaceful, and wondered why happiness came so easily to him. I began to envy his comfort. I wanted to shake him and ask how he could not see what I saw, but I stayed quiet. One evening, a woman named Vida Sherwin came to visit me. She was a teacher and one of the few people in town who still spoke to me kindly. She said she liked my ideas and that the town needed someone like me. Her words were kind, but they also made me feel worse. I wanted more than kind words. I wanted change. Vita told me I should not fight everyone. She said people were not bad, only afraid of new things. I wanted to believe her, but I was too tired. Months passed, and life continued in the same slow rhythm. The same mornings, the same faces, the same words repeated again and again. I began to feel that time itself was standing still. The only thing that moved was me, walking through the quiet streets like a shadow. One summer evening, I went to the town's only movie theater. The film was old and the sound was poor, but I did not care. For 2 hours, I was in another world. When the movie ended, I did not want to go home. I walked slowly through the empty streets. The lamps gave a weak yellow light, and the air was full of the smell of dust and grass. I looked at the dark windows of the houses and wondered if everyone inside was happy. I doubted it, but they had learned not to ask for more. When I reached home, I stood for a long time before the door. Inside, I could hear Will talking to a patient. His calm voice filled the house, warm and sure. I realized that he would always belong to this town. It was his world, his rhythm, his peace, and I, though married to him, would always be an outsider. That night, I sat by the window long after he went to bed. I looked at the stars above the flat land and thought about what it meant to belong somewhere. Maybe it was not the town that refused to change. Maybe it was me who refused to give up dreaming. I wondered how long a person could live between two worlds, one that was safe but lifeless, and another that was full of dreams but too far away. As the night grew colder, I closed the window and lay down. I told myself that I would stay for now, that perhaps things might get better. But deep inside, I knew the truth. The town was stronger than I was. It did not shout or fight, but it waited quietly until people stopped resisting. It waited until they became part of its slow silence. I did not want to become one of them, but every day I felt the town's quiet voice inside me, whispering that I already had. The days after that night passed slowly. I felt as if I was walking through a thick fog. I still cooked, cleaned, and smiled when people spoke to me, but something inside me was different. I no longer believed that I could change Gopher Prairie. The town had won its quiet fight. It had not shouted at me, but it had waited patiently until I was too tired to argue. I began to see how people survived here. They did not fight against life. They accepted it, and in time, they stopped feeling the weight of their own silence. One morning, I walked to the edge of town where the fields began. The land stretched far in every direction, flat and endless. I could see the farms, small and far apart, and the wind moved softly through the yellow grass. I stood there for a long time and thought about how small Gopher Prairie was compared to the world. Yet it felt stronger than any city because it held people in its slow rhythm until they forgot to dream. I was afraid that soon I would forget too. That afternoon, I went to visit Mrs. Westlake, an older woman who lived near the school. She was kind and gentle, and I often helped her with small things. She said she wanted to give me some new fabric for sewing. When I arrived, she was sitting by the window, sewing a quilt. She smiled at me and said, "You will learn to love this place one day." Her voice was full of peace, but it made me sad. I wondered if that was love or only habit. I thanked her for the fabric and went home. At home, I found Will reading his newspaper again. I sat beside him and watched the fire. The light made his face look calm and honest. I wanted to tell him what I felt, but I did not know where to begin. I wanted to tell him that I loved him, but that I was also lost. I wanted him to understand that love was not enough when everything around us was gray, but when I looked at him, I saw that he would not understand. For him, love and life were the same thing. He was happy because he could work, help people, and come home to a warm house. That was enough for him. Later that evening, after he went to sleep, I sat alone in the kitchen. The house was quiet, and the clock ticked softly on the wall. I thought about my younger self, the girl who had believed she could change the world. I wanted to meet her again and ask her how she had so much courage. I wanted to tell her not to marry comfort too soon, not to let dreams become housework. But I also knew that she would not listen. She would believe that love could build anything. In the next months, I began to travel sometimes with Will when he visited patients in the countryside. The open land made me feel lighter. I liked watching the small houses and farms, the animals in the fields, the wide sky. It reminded me that life could be bigger than what I saw every day. The people we met were kind, and they always offered me tea and stories. They were poor, but their faces were open and real. I began to see beauty in their simple honesty. I realized that not everyone here was blind to dreams. Some people just never had the chance to see another way of living. One day, after visiting a sick woman on a farm, Will said he had to go on to another house, and I could stay and rest. The woman's daughter, who was about 20, sat with me. She said she wanted to leave the farm and study in the city. Her eyes were full of light when she spoke. I listened to her and felt something inside me awaken. I told her that she should go, that she must not let anyone make her smaller. She smiled and said she would remember my words. When I left that house, I felt as if I had given a part of myself to someone else who might live my dream. That night, as the Shantisfon train brought us back into town, I looked at the dark shape of Gopher Prairie. The lights were few and far apart. I felt no anger anymore, only a quiet sadness. I thought about how strange it was that a place could be both home and prison. I rested my head against the window and watched the fields pass by. The reflection of my face in the glass looked older than before. In early spring, I told Will that I wanted to visit the city for a few months. I said I wanted to take some courses and see my old friends. He hesitated but then agreed. He said it might do me good. When I packed my bags, I felt a mix of guilt and excitement. I knew he needed me, but I also needed to breathe. As the train moved away from the station, I looked back and saw him standing there, small and still. I did not cry, but I felt a soft pain that followed me all the way to the city. Life in the city felt like waking up after a long sleep. The noise, the light, the movement of people. It filled me with energy. I visited art galleries, read new books, and met people who talked about ideas. I found a small room and began to work in a library. Each day I felt my mind open again. I remembered who I was before Gopher Prairie. But sometimes at night I thought of Will sitting alone by the fire. I knew that he loved me in his quiet way. I missed his kindness, even if it was not enough to make me stay. After a few months, I received a letter from him. He said the town missed me and that the house felt empty. He told me he hoped I was happy, but that he wanted me to come home soon. I read the letter many times. Each time, the word home, home, felt heavier. I asked myself where home really was. Was it the place where someone loved me, or the place where I could love myself? I did not have an answer. In the end, I went back. I told myself I would stay for a time, not forever. When I arrived, the town looked the same as before, quiet and still. People greeted me kindly but with curiosity. Some said I looked different. Maybe I did. Inside, I felt stronger. I no longer believed I could change the town, but I also knew that the town could not fully change me either. I had seen too much of the world now. Will was happy to see me. He showed me the new rooms he had painted and said he hoped they would make me feel better. I smiled and thanked him. That night, as we sat together, I felt both near and far from him. I knew he would never understand my restlessness, but I also knew I loved him for his goodness. I realized that maybe the real fight was not with the town, but with the part of me that wanted everything to be perfect. Over the next year, I lived quietly. I helped at the school and taught small classes for the children. Sometimes I took long walks by the river and watched the water move. I still dreamed of color and art and music, but now I accepted that not all dreams needed to come true to give meaning to life. Some dreams could live quietly inside, like a small light that never went out. There were days when I felt peace. I learned to see small beauty in ordinary things, a child's laughter, a sunset over the flat land, a neighbor's kind word. The town was still slow and repetitive, but it no longer made me angry. It was what it was. The world was full of many kinds of lives, and perhaps mine was meant to be one that learned patience. Sometimes I thought about leaving again, but I did not. I stayed because I had grown to understand something deeper. I could not escape myself by changing the place. I had to find peace inside me first. I knew I would always carry a part of my old dream, but it no longer hurt as before. It became a quiet strength that reminded me who I was. Years later, when I looked at the town from the same hill where I had first stood, I saw it differently. The streets were still plain, the houses still small, but I no longer saw only the limits. I saw the lives inside those houses, the small joys, the quiet hopes, the simple loves. I saw myself among them, not as someone defeated, but as someone who had learned to live with imperfection. I understood then that dreams do not always break completely. Sometimes they bend and become something else, something softer but still alive. The town had not destroyed me. It had only taught me how hard it is to keep a dream alive in a world that moves slowly. It had shown me that even in silence, there is strength, and even in ordinary lives, there can be quiet courage. When I walked home that evening, the sky was turning orange, and the smell of cut grass filled the air. I heard the sound of children playing in the distance, and I smiled. I knew I would never be the woman I once imagined, but I was still someone who had tried. That, I thought, was enough. If you liked my story, please like, comment, and share.